Hey, it's Dr. Gonzo, and I'm here with Dr. Gonzo's Talking Points. Thanks for tuning in. It's really cool to have a leader in our Fort Worth area, Dr. Stuart Flynn, who's actually the new dean of the new TCU UNT HSC Med School that will begin its first class enrolling in 2019. Right, Stuart?
That's exactly right.
So, Stuart, this is a really exact time. Thank you a really great time for the history of Fort Worth. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
So let's start with the beginning. Just tell the listeners a little bit about you and how did you get to Fort Worth? How did you tell them your journey to Fort Worth?
Okay, I'll make it very short because that's all anyone would want to hear. Went to medical school at the University of Michigan. Did a fellowship at Stanford, and at that moment in time was asked to do a fair amount of teaching. And so I had my day job, which was running a research lab, running a clinical lab, and being a diagnostic surgical pathologist, and kind of got bitten by that bug. Went to Yale, and I was there 20 years. And about halfway through that, they asked me to run the medical school curriculum at a substantive level and to be a leader in GME there. So once again, I was melding all the components of my career, but really one of the things that gave me a lot of energy and a lot of enjoyment was the teaching side, was the engagement with medical students and residents. And so long story short, got recruited to the University of Arizona to start a new medical school in Phoenix.
Okay, before you jump and continue, there's actually two connecting dots here that I want to make so the listeners can put in perspective. So when you were in Stanford, you knew Shumway, right?
Oh, I knew Dr. Shumway well. Yes. Okay. I looked at a lot of heart transplants biopsies with Dr. Billingham on behalf of Dr. Shumway.
Okay, so you knew Shumway, and we recently had on our show about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had Jack Copeland. So you also knew or interacted at some point, I'm imagining, with Jack Copeland too, right?
I did. Less of an interaction there. He was in Tucson. But certainly iconic and revered. So yes.
So and then you come to Fort Worth and we get together, and I'm passionate about heart transplantation. So it's almost like 6 degrees of separation between Kevin Bacon and everybody else. This is 6 degrees of separation.
No, that's
some way, right?
That's a beautiful thing. And actually, when I got to Yale, I wasn't hired to do the heart transplants there, but they found out somehow, some way that I had done them at Stanford. And so I did the heart transplants at Yale for 20 years.
That's awesome. All right. So we're in Arizona now. So tell us about Arizona.
So the University of Arizona, long story short, had a relatively young medical school in Tucson. And Phoenix knew that they, as the 5th largest city in the country, had to have a medical school. They had been a 2-year branch campus for the Tucson Medical School. And so I was recruited out there to design a curriculum for a 4-year medical school in Phoenix. And quite quickly, it got transformed into a separately accredited medical school.
Cool.
So I stayed there 10 years and stood up a very nice medical school. A lot of similarities to Fort Worth, vis-a-vis very collaborative clinical partners and just a beautiful substrate. And then got called by a headhunter, as the way this works, as you know well, Gonzo.
Yep.
And that the first time ever in a medical school setting like this, 2 universities had kind of bonded to start an allopathic medical school in Fort Worth, and those were TCU and UNT-HSC.
Okay.
And so I came out for an airport interview, fell in love with the city, fell in love with the 2 campuses. And heard some amazing things from the leaders of both universities, and at the end, really came out here and left Phoenix. I didn't have the luxury in Phoenix of modifying the clinical curriculum much because, as I had mentioned, it was a 2-year branch campus, so it was very traditional.
Right
here, clean slate, and so we are really taking advantage of that. Not because we want to be different, but because genuinely, I think we're still stuck, basically in the flexnerian model of how we're training physicians. And yet the reality is, as you know all too well in your discipline, the science and the art of medicine is just screaming forward, and we've got to get on top of that wave, if not a little bit on the front of it. So that's the opportunity in Fort Worth.
So now we're at Fort Worth, and I got to tell you, to the listeners, so Stuart and I got introduced at a retreat that occurred at Baylor All Saints a couple of years ago. And as he started developing his vision and explained to me his vision, what I found out is that I found a kin spirit in basically in creating something new from the ground up and being part of something that was going to be historical for the city of Fort Worth. So when Stu and I sat down, and we probably met a couple of times, it became brutally apparent that this was something that I wanted to be part of. And basically, as Stuart asked me, and I without hesitation, I said, "Count me in as one of your your staff members for the medical school." And so now Stuart is there, and he's doing some. I mean, it's impressive. But you know, all that is good and dandy with regards of executing your vision. And I want to talk a little bit more about what your vision is today. But tell me what are the major areas of opportunity? And, you know, we've gone into administration talking about challenges not being a positive word, but there are challenges, right? There are challenges, in particular in our city of Fort Worth, in which we have 4 dominant healthcare systems, right? I mean, we've got Baylor, we've got THR, we've got HCA, and then we've got the county hospital, JPS, which is run by the city, the county at Tarrant County. And so how do you get all these hospitals together? How do you get also industry to buy into the concept of creating a medical school? Because those are incredible challenges. And mind you, in a very short period of time, because this is not happening over 10 years. This is going to happen, gee Louise, in a year and a half from now.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I have to say, when I was being recruited here, people kept telling me about the pride of Fort Worth and Tarrant County and the beautiful opportunities and that people actually are collaborative and work well together. Well, Gonzo, you and I have been in your academic environments, and talk is sometimes pretty cheap when it comes to those concepts. I got here, and the substrate to do something profound in Fort Worth, I don't think it exists anyplace else. Maybe San Jose, but San Jose can defend themselves on that. Right. And what I mean by that is phenomenal healthcare systems, huge. Everything a medical school needs, i.e., great community hospitals, a very good public hospital, and a children's hospital. And oh, by the way, the last piece. Oh,
thank you. I totally forgot. It's 5 because Cooks is a different entity from everybody else. Yeah.
And unbelievable. And then I just have to say, and I say this to medical school applicants and residency applicants, the last part of the puzzle, and by no means the last in value, is a VA. So we now have a very strong relationship with the Dallas VA, and they have an ambulatory clinic in Fort Worth. So all the ingredients are here. So now, if depending on the vision of everyone and what we want to accomplish, and Gonzo, you and I will be very old with a lot of gray hair by the time we see the fruits of this really kick in, but we have to start it today. So to your question, every one of the entities I mentioned and the large physician groups are now teaching partners with us. I haven't encountered any pushback because there is a benevolence to training the next generation. That's a beautiful thing.
Well, and let me add to the fact that I think that you hit it on the head, that the feeling of community and pride that exists in Fort Worth, it's rivaled by very few cities in the United States. I can tell you that the reason that I've actually been successful is because we have made a conscientious effort at staying there in Fort Worth and infusing the excitement, the growth, the vision, and everything that we're doing to be solely Fort Worth. This is not anybody outside of Fort Worth. This is the entire Fort Worth community coming together and doing something magnificent like this, right?
I agree. And I will say, and Gonzo, you and I are academicians to the core. The beauty of Fort Worth is I have individuals like you to be a critical part of this medical school, but I also have a large cohort of very talented physicians.
Absolutely.
Who haven't really been in academics, and quite frankly, you and I know well, really don't want any part of it. But that's in a traditional definition of what an academic is: grant funded, publishing,
right?
A lot of research pursuit. Well, for this model of this medical school, great clinician, talented teacher. From my point of view, you are an exceptionally valuable faculty member.
Right.
So I have that in spades. And so the environment is here to do two things: to become very forward-looking in our curriculum. Our vision, to succinctly put it, and I can flesh this out any way you want, we want to train empathetic scholars. That is not a trite phrase. That is exactly what we have our focus on. The second thing, which you know very well, is Fort Worth is very light in GME.
Right.
So we're going to crank out 60 new docs a year, but only a very small subset will even have the opportunity to stay in Fort Worth.
Right.
And therefore we're going to help with the national physician shortage. But the reality is, we also should be very much helping with the Texas and the Tarrant County.
Absolutely.
That's one component. And very quickly, I'll put a stop to this. The second is, and this sounds arrogant, but I just believe it to my core. 80-some% of medical discoveries occur within a 25-mile radius of an academic medical center. Mm-hmm. We now have one in Fort Worth. So we should start driving discovery with all of our colleagues. We should also start to change the paradigm of where we want to of healthcare delivery, because now we can try models, we can assess them, and we can go into a continuous quality improvement modality, which again, whether we like it or not as physicians, it's coming at us, and we better be nimble, because if we're not, we're going to get steamrolled in this. And then the very last part of the question you asked me is, what about industry? Well, those of us in North Texas know that North Texas is just an unbelievable ripe environment for industry,
right?
For biotech, for pharma. But once again, they look for three things, and in no particular order. When industry wants to move, they or set up a substantive shop. Number one, they look out for their employees. So what is the school system? What are my opportunities for my families? Okay, so everyone is addressing that with great zeal in Tarrant County.
Right.
And we have room for improvement, but we're not taking that lightly. We will improve it. The second thing they look for, once again, which is very related to what you and I do, they look for, what is the healthcare system for my family?
Right.
So it's about the employees. The third thing they look for is, what is the ecosystem that can drive the very collaborative team approach to discovery? Well, that's where the academic medical center kicks in. So now we can be, we're a very small nidus. I get that. So we're very nascent in the crystal we're trying to grow. But we can be part of something much greater. Again, attracting biotech, attracting pharma. And so that's the goal. And I will tell you, without calling entities out, because I think it would be inappropriate on their behalf, but we're right now in serious discussions with 4 major national entities to really start to grow this ecosystem, and to not ignore the fact that Dallas has also a very nice ecosystem. So
absolutely, there's
plenty of room for everybody in North Texas. That's for sure.
I was actually gonna throw a joke out there. Has Jeff Bezos called you?
No, but I have him in my contact list, so I don't miss it if he does.
Well, let me tell you something, and you know what? It's so exciting to hear this, because now when you look at it as a community and as a community, I mean, you're right. Fort Worth seems to be just perfect, and you got a blank palette or a blank canvas that you can basically start painting. And this, to me, this is a sales pitch that I would actually have for Jeff Bezos and Amazon, not only to move, to Fort Worth, because we have all the elements that they want, right? And I know everybody's competing for this, but also, they're and Warren Buffett are trying to figure out this whole healthcare thing.
Yep.
And it would be a great area to do it from the ground up. So I think as an investment and as a potential attraction, Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, this is what we got in Fort Worth going on. So just add that to the elements that we can provide. It would give everybody a blank canvas again to sort of create what they want. Okay.
Well, Gonzo, I would tell Jeff Bezos and anyone else listening, we won't have it perfect, but we will be in a constant, continuous quality improvement. But our intent, just to reiterate it, is to train forward-looking healthcare people who will deliver healthcare, and that's not just physicians, as you and I know very well.
Yep.
It's the entire environment. I look just to kind of ground what I just said. Our first graduating class will not see their first patient by themselves, in other words, in their practice, until 2026. So here we are in 2018. Well, when you and I trained, because we're a little long in the tooth, 8 years out was not that big of a deal, right?
No,
it would have been, it's going to look. You and I both know, with medical knowledge now doubling every 73 days, if we don't train them how to be facile in discovery of how to find that medical knowledge and not rely just on your journals coming out or textbooks, then we've done them. I would submit that's educational malpractice for a brand new medical school to set this up the same way you and I trained. So Jeff Bezos, we're trying to, for your employees, we're trying to train the next generation that actually will be very, very facile on how to deal with discovery of medical knowledge, how to deal with technology. And I don't mean the fancy schmancy expensive stuff.
Right.
I mean the stuff that is going to make the healthcare that our practitioners will deliver better and more cost effective.
And that's also for Warren Buffett, if he's listening, hopefully he will, that there's actually some value to it that will come at a very low cost if actually we can start from the ground up, right, as Stuart is pointing out. Let's dive real quick into the curriculum. So tell me tell the listeners how this new medical school, and we're talking about with Dr. Stuart Flynn, the dean of the TCU UNTHSC Medical School. Tell me how the curriculum is going to be different from what traditional curriculums or curriculums out there in some of the medical schools are going by.
Yeah, and I can feel physicians right now rolling their eyes. How many times have we heard this, right? But I'm very comfortable saying this, and I'm happy to watch you roll your eyes, and then and I'm happy to discuss it. Very, very quickly. I mean, I could talk for hours on this. You would just hang up on me, so we wouldn't get anything accomplished.
I'm going to listen. Let me tell you.
So as a soundbite, I just want to say, right, we've all trained medical students, once again, sitting in lecture halls for hours ad nauseum. Yeah. We're not doing that. The young people don't come. They listen to podcasts like this, and everyone's offended by the whole process. So first things first, we will have no lectures in a traditional sense. So I'll leave that at that. Secondly, which is really one of the veins of gold in our curriculum, is when and Gonzo, you've lived through this, when you talk to young people who want to go to medical school, they're really, truly some of the most idealistic and truly empathetic young people you will ever meet.
Yep.
And unfortunately, they get into medical school with that passion. By the time they graduate, and it's multifactorial. It's not because we're mean, and it's not because they have to work hard. These kids will work hard. I have zero issues with this generation in that regard. But they really, one of the big things is, so what happens is their empathy just tanks. So now we graduate 4 years after they entered just telling you they wanted to take care of mankind and absolutely sincere, to now now it's a job to them, right? It's a grind. So one of the big reasons is we have trained medical students in-house in the hospital setting since Flexner.
Yep.
And nowadays with patients, even if they get admitted, they're out within 23 hours. Now nobody gets to know their patients. So these young kids have a patient in room 3 that has to be discharged by 10 this morning. They have the gallbladder in room 6, and they have something in room 7. Now, in that discussion is not a patient's name, is not that this is a single mom with 3 kids at home, and what is this hospitalization, who's taking care of her kids, and all of those stories. So 32 other countries have gotten way ahead of us in this game, I believe.
In what way?
Say again?
In what way they're ahead of us?
Well, that's the curriculum now. I would love to tell you this is my idea, but it's not. But the beauty of it, it's also been tried and true and put through a lot of ringers. So Canada is a very good example. So what they do in their clinical training is they put their students in the environment within which two things happen. They're more likely than not going to practice in that environment. And I'm talking about ambulatory training, okay, just to call a spade a spade. The second thing is you give this student a small cohort of patients. So they follow this small panel of patients, maybe 20, through this clinical year. And guess what they get to know? They get to know those patients
intimately.
Like tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So that is, so it's called a longitudinal integrated clerkship. And that was, I'm telling you, I brought a lot of people here and they kept challenging me, Stuart, are you really going to do this? Stuart, do you really have the audacity to do this? And the answer was yes, yes, yes. And so now we're going to do it. So Fort Worth is our culture medium. We'll be the first medical school to do this across the breadth of their training. Harvard does a subset of students every year, 15 students. We talked to their leader, David Hirsch, and he is just over the moon that we're getting to do this.
That is awesome.
With all of our students. So, and nothing is lost in this for the physicians in the crowd. So they have 7 different clinics that they'll spend a half a day, either a week or every other week, in 7 disciplines. They will also do an immersion. They will do 10 weeks in-house with acute medical care, surgery, and labor and delivery.
Right.
And then I'll just throw in and be quiet about the longitudinal integrated. They will also follow their patients who get admitted. An easy one is a woman who's pregnant and goes into labor.
Right.
They will follow that patient and help deliver the baby, and their patient panel will just have grown by 1. And they will also, and this is very judicious.
So then what they'll do also, you actually just alluded to that. When Stuart said their patient panel has grown by 1, that means that they will also be responsible for following that new life that just was born, right? So
big time.
So you basically, so now you have 21, but now you have basically caring for not only in utero, right? Which is what you would also do if you're doing OB and following your patient that's pregnant. That's really exciting. So now you basically have the opportunity to follow a life, growth, psychological development, physical development, disease states, and all that stuff from the beginning of life, which is super exciting.
Well, and you know well, Gonzo, and this is why I really love this opportunity. You and I saw women who were in their first trimester, their second trimester, their third trimester, and they delivered. They were never the same women, right? Because we weren't on that clerkship long enough to follow somebody through 9 months. Not the case here. The second thing is when the baby was born, pretty quickly, the pediatricians scooped the baby up. And so since I'm on OB, I don't follow the little baby, even though I just watch watch the young person be delivered. So you can see a lot of the beauty in this. And our students will also follow to occasional consult clinics. So if one of my students' patients needs to see you, Gonzo, very probable that student will be in that consultative visit, not to hold the patient's hand, not to speak for the patient, there to see what happens when I send my patient for a consult in another discipline.
Well, and I can see it actually, and this is extremely visionary. I mean, for those that are listening, I mean, you're listening to Dr. Stuart Flynn, the new dean of the TCU UNTHSC Medical School talk here. But Stuart's being incredibly visionary because dialing back to the problem in our current society with healthcare, okay, it's the fact that we're intervening at point of care that are basically halfway or late in terms of the disease process, and then it becomes very difficult to manage and very expensive. Whereas if you're able to learn and to do it early on, right, and have, like Stuart said, the panels of patients that basically from the beginning of the life, and you can, as a physician, start modulating that, or as a healthcare system, start modulating that before they develop the diseases, whether it's diabetes, hypertension, all that stuff, then healthcare system becomes much more cheaper, right? Because you're seeing this baby from the ground, from being born, and you can intervene before they develop the vasculopathy, the neuropathies, the renal failure, all these things that basically chew on our healthcare system. I think it's brilliant from a healthcare system model too, Stuart.
Well, and that's you did a great job summarizing that, Gonzo. Not surprising. That's exactly, you and I both know the pressure on healthcare now is to keep our society healthy. Easier said than done, as we know. But this is from my point of view, this is a nice beginning kernel of opportunity where our students get this opportunity to intervene with their patients rather than waiting until they're in a hospital, which is where you and I trained. We get a chance to try to keep them out of the hospital.
Absolutely.
Right. So maybe the other two things I would just mention about our curriculum, which I'm just a tad excited to have the opportunity to do. One is, it's interesting, Gonzo, you probably do this too. When I'm out in lay people audiences and I ask them, what is the one thing they wish their provider would do better? However I frame that, right? And I am going to tell you with greater than 90%. They don't say, oh, I wish they could listen through their stethoscope better or do my reflexes better. They invariably say, I wish my physician would spend a little more time with me.
Yep.
Would sit down, take a breath, look me in the eye, and touch me, right? Yep. And so you and I get it. We're patients and we're physicians, and there's that's motherhood and apple pie. And so why don't we do it? Well, we all know it's multifactorial. I'm not going to try to make it a simple cure because it's not. But so long story short, we had Alan Alda visit with part of his team a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And Alan Alda of MASH fame started an institute in New York City that had the singular purpose of training physicians and scientists how to communicate better with their patients or with the lay population. Okay, so our world. And came and visited, and I met his curricular leader, Yvonne Kaplan-Liss, who is a physician and a communications major and a very, very special person who has her own medical story, needless to say. Move the clock forward to today. We, with Alan Alda's approval and acknowledgement and sign-off, we have now brought a large component of his team to our medical school. She is the first dean in the country, and this sounds trite, but this is how significant and serious we think this is. She's our dean of communication and narrative or introspective writing. So our graduates will be, if they're nothing else, they will know how to communicate with their patients. And just to frame, what does this mean? Because it sounds so amorphous. Yvonne does an exercise, and long story, very brief. We as physicians tend to interrupt after we ask our patient the first question. We interrupt our patient somewhere within 19 seconds. And therefore, that's where patients start to feel this rush, right? It turns out when we say, well, how much would a patient like to be able to talk before interrupted? And we come to this assumption, probably 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. It turns out it's 90 seconds. Okay. So that gap between 19 seconds and 90 seconds is, as you know, not very long. It feels long, of course, when you're in the examining room.
Right.
But that small incremental change can change your patient from feeling, in a very rushed environment to one where she felt like she got to share her story enough where she starts to feel better about it, right?
Right.
And then the last thing I would say in our curriculum, all of our graduates have to do a 4-year research project and culminates in a thesis. But that's very important. But I do want to share, we've packaged a bunch of what you and I grew up with as soft curriculum that we would blow through as medical students: ethics.
Although ethics is not, trust me, ethics is not that soft, right?
It's not soft at all. But to a 23, 24-year-old medical student, when they're trying to learn the coagulation cascade,
absolutely,
and the Krebs cycle, and you feel like you have to throw something overboard, you throw over things like ethics. You throw over things like cultural competency, right?
Yeah.
You throw over things like wellness. What the heck? I'm going to be a doc. What does wellness have to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Healthcare economics. So we're trying to outfox the foxes here. So we have packaged all of these and turned it into an anointed course, and it's called Preparation for Practice. And so over our 4 years of a medical student's lifetime, we have 10 of these themes that very consciously, not token. This is woven into the fabric of our curriculum. So they will get very nice exposure. They won't get a lifetime's worth. It's medical school.
Well, and there's always postgraduate education. That's part of the responsibility of as a physician too.
Well, Gonzo, and I would just add to that, I couldn't agree more with you. And that's why in Fort Worth, this is my absolute personal belief. And I'm happy to have people tell me I'm pretty silly saying this, but graduate medical education hasn't changed much.
Absolutely not.
Also, right? So where does communication get taught in GME? Right. Where does ethics in healthcare? Where does healthcare economics? And I'm not being critical. I mean, I've been a GME leader my entire career, but it's got to change. It's got to change.
Absolutely.
Well,
listen, that's all really good stuff, Stuart. I just wanted to just before we sign off here, how do people find out more about the medical school? Where do they go to? Is there a number? Just give me a summary of where can they find out more information if they want to start applying, because hopefully we'll also have some of the listeners that'll be medical students that are looking for new or college students that are looking for a school to go to. Just give me a synopsis of how do you get a hold of it?
Unfortunately, my hands are tied on this one, and I don't mean unfortunately that I'm complaining. It's the rules of the game. My accreditation body does not allow me to even talk to an applicant or accept an application until we're accredited. We will get that phone call in the first week of October. They come and visit us for 3.5 days in a month.
Okay.
And they'll beat us up pretty hard, and that's what we want.
That's fine.
And we'll get the call that we have preliminary accreditation. I'm fully anticipating that in October. At that nanosecond, we flip the switch. We'll have our website go live, and we will start accepting applicants. And our first class will start in July of 2019. So we've worked 2 years to get here, and we are excited to flip that switch.
Well, listen, and it's actually exciting for all of those listening, because if you want to see how a medical school gets built and how to see what Stuart is able to construct and build using all the resources associated to a society like Fort Worth, it's going to be a very exciting time. And I'm very grateful, and I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity of being part of what you're trying to do, Stuart. It's really exciting stuff.
Thanks, Gonzo. I appreciate it.
Okay, with that being said, thanks everybody for listening. Stuart, thanks for being on the show. And you're listening to Dr. Gonzo's Talking Points. Tune in next week. We'll have some more new and fresh content and exciting content. Stuart, have a great week, and I'll catch up with you this week, okay?
Thanks, Gonzo. You too.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye.